Just how good was Juan Martin Del Potro, really? People always say, this is a guy who should have won more. This is a player that, if he wasn't constantly injured, this is a player that would have taken up to new heights and would have been one of the biggest challenges to the Big Three. If he didn't play in the Big Three era, he would have had even crazier heights. If he had no injuries, no crazy era to play in, how good could Juan Martin Del Potro really been? And forget another era. Playing in this era, even with the career that he did have, he had some incredible achievements, did some incredible things. So imagine if he did that without having to get the 8 different surgeries that he had to get throughout his entire career on multiple different parts of his body. How competitive he constantly was against even the Big Three, against everybody that he would play, constantly playing epic matches. One of the biggest forehands on tour, one of the biggest and best personalities that really grew fan bases from all over the world. Great shot maker, great talent, but his biggest strength was his crazy fighting mentality from the Gentle Giant and the Argentine. He really had this personality that sucked everybody in. You wanted to root for him. And he was an incredible shot maker. And very fast too at 6'6". He had an incredible game. Very big threat on the other side of the court. Constant threat whenever he was playing. He had an amazing win percentage. We'll get to all of that. How good could Del Potro have been had it not been for all of the different factors that came to play? He was amazing already with the career that he did have. I want to get to all of that and talk about the career of Juan Martin Del Potro and what it could have been. My name's Anthony Hirsch, and welcome to the Tennis Commentary Booth. So first, let's talk about what he really did do. I want to talk about the career that he really did have. I can talk a little bit about the injuries that he had throughout his career as well. But something that's real, he had 22 titles throughout his career. He had 22 titles throughout his career. That's out of 35 different finals. The finals that he did lose to, constantly losing to top 10, top 5 incredible players. We'll get to that. But I also want to talk about his injuries, because he didn't reach any finals between November of 2009 and February of 2011. Over a year. That was his last finals, the ATP finals. He had an injury, and we'll get to what all the injuries were, because I want to really dive a little bit into the career of Del Potro and what really took place. The dark elements, the good elements. I want to get to how good Juan Martin Del Potro really was. And then between January 2014 and August 2016, he didn't make any finals. His first final back was actually the Olympic final against Murray. Murray winning his 2nd consecutive Olympics, which is kind of crazy. And then again a year between October 2016 and October 2017. So constant over 2.5 years. A couple of two different periods of over a year. So that's a little bit of a show. He constantly had breaks in his career. And then when he did come back to play, some of the injuries were constantly taking away from his momentum. Del Potro honestly was a player that ran well when he had momentum on his side in a tournament or in his career. And that shows with how he broke out into the scene. I'll get to that. But it just constantly wasn't able to play. But yeah, when the first time Del Potro broke out onto the scene, he was a teenager in 2008. He won 4 straight titles, 23 straight matches. That's one of the best win streaks of the last, really ever, but like of the last 20 years, 25, 30 years particularly. That's up there. And it's an incredible accomplishment to win 4 consecutive titles. Was an incredible hardcourt player, but he could play well on clay courts and grass courts as well. He showed that throughout his career. Really underachieved on grass court, but he's played some incredible all-time matches on grass, and he really underperformed. Lost an epic semifinal at the Olympics in 2012 to Federer, 19-17 in the semis. to Fed. And then another one at Wimbledon 2013, had an incredible comeback versus Novak, but lost it in 5 sets. 2013, Novak was playing incredible. Tired Novak out for the final there. And then 2018 against Rafa, the famous quarterfinal of Wimbledon against Rafa in 2018, before Rafa and Novak were playing epic in the semis. But yeah, he constantly was losing these epic matches on grass. But he could play well on all 3 surfaces. Obviously, big forehand, big game, works well on grass court. Good touch as well. He has good hands as well. He's really a very complete player. Which is what's amazing. So yeah, but he's a player that runs well with momentum. And not only that, not only were the injuries stopping him from running with this momentum, whenever he would get to the place where, okay, he's finally playing good tennis, he would get injured again. And the injuries, more and more throughout his career, would snowball and make it so that his game was getting worse and worse. Yeah, he was still performing amazingly. He was still performing at an incredible level against everybody on tour with an amazing win percentage. His win percentage is top 20, nearly top 20 in the Open era, which, what does that mean? That means his wins to loss percentage, how many wins he has to how many losses, which in reality is probably the most important stat in tennis. How much you win compared to how much you lose. Obviously you could say, okay, well, which players are you beating? Which titles are you winning? And I understand all of that. But his win percentage is nearly top 20 in the Open era. It's at nearly 72% of matches won across all tournaments, which is really amazing. And you might say, oh, well, he didn't play that many matches. He still played over 600 tour level matches. He was 439, 174 in his career, 71.6 win percentage. Like I said, almost top 20. I think 21st, 22nd best in the Open era, 71.6% win percentage. Highest ranking number 3. Insane. He never got to number 2 in the world. He has the record for most wins over number 1 players without having been number 1 himself. And the number 1s that he had to beat were some of the best ever, Federer, Nadal, Djokovic. So that's incredible as well. And yeah, I want to talk about that. I put together these stats myself. I didn't find these online. I put these together because I had a feeling that Juan Martin Del Potro performed very well against the big 3. I found these a few months ago. I looked into it. I had a good feeling that even though Del Potro maybe hasn't beaten the big 3 as much as Dominic Thiem, and maybe he hasn't beaten them in the big finals as much as, let's say, a Stanislav Wawrinka. But I think that Del Potro consistently competitively played against the big 3 better than nearly anyone. If not maybe behind Dominic Thiem playing them later in their careers. But Del Potro in general, with a huge pool of matches, was constantly very competitive against them. And I have stats to back it up. So here are the stats for how often Del Potro would win a set, at least a set, against the big 3 in their different matches. So, against Murray, he won a set 9 out of 10 times that they played. Against Andy Murray, he won at least a set 9 out of 10 times that they played. Against Nadal, he won a set at least 11 out of 17 times that they played. Against Federer, 14 of 25 times. These are against some of the best players that ever played. Against Djokovic, 12 out of 20. Well, you might say, I mean, winning a set against Djokovic, 12 of 20, I mean, what are you talking about? Post-2009. 2009 and onwards, here are the numbers. 7 out of 8 times against Murray, still just about the same. Post-2009 against Rafa, 11 of 14. He won at least a set. Post-2009 and on against Federer, 14 of 22. Against Djokovic, 12 of 18. Okay? So, in general, 64%, 63.89% of matches that he played against the big 3, he won at least a set. Percentage 2009 and on, 70.97. 71, when Del Potro became the player that he became, 71% of matches that he played against the big 3, he won at least a set. Okay? So, if you want to know, okay, well, what are you talking about? I mean, that doesn't seem that impressive. Well, I'll say this. That is the best stats. That's the best stats of anybody against the big three. It's the best stats of anybody against the big three. Even if you did total percentage, not just 2009 and onwards, but also 2007, 2008, before Del Potro really became the player that he became, even if you do that, Del Potro's total percentage, 63.89%. So let's say 64% of matches, Del Potro won at least one set against the big three. For David Ferrer, another great player from this kind of last era, 43.33% of matches. So about 43% versus 64% for Del Potro. Wawrinka, 47.92%. Wawrinka, about 48% versus Del Potro, 64%. Remember, from 2009 and onwards, that's 71% of sets. 71% of matches that Del Potro would play against the big three, he won at least a set. That's way better than Ferrer or Wawrinka. And guess what? It's better than Murray as well. It's better than Murray as well. Del Potro, if you go 2009 and onwards, against the big three, Del Potro, is 68.51% taking a set. 37 of 54 matches, he would take at least a set against the big three. Murray against the big three, 2009 and onwards, 64.18%. Even Murray, Del Potro, even better than Murray in how many times he would take a set playing the big three. So that just shows that Del Potro was constantly competitive against the big three in all of the matches that they would play. I mean, those are just some really remarkable stats. 71% of matches that Del Potro would play against Federer, Nadal, Djokovic, he would take at least a set and often would beat them, but nearly always made it competitive. He was always a huge threat on the other side of the court with an incredible, fearless mentality and huge shots and very skillful shots that would come along with it too. Just a master on the court. And I would say, like I said, very little weaknesses as well. I mean, his biggest weakness, probably his backhand that would revert to slices, largely because of his wrist injuries that he had starting 2014, 2015. But, I mean, aside from that, he really doesn't have a huge weakness. His movement isn't a big weakness despite his 6'6" build. He was the tallest player at one point to ever win a Grand Slam. Later on, that would be matched by Marin Cilic and Daniil Medvedev, who were also 6'6". But listen, those are really incredible stats for Del Potro. And listen, his head-to-head against Rafa specifically, against Nadal specifically, very, very good. I'll give you the numbers for his kind of head-to-head against Nadal. It's really, really good numbers. So, against Nadal, like I said, he won a set, starting from 2009, he won a set against Nadal in 11 out of 14 matches that they would play. He would win at least a set. And then, starting from 2009 and on, Nadal was 8-6 versus Del Potro. That's very close. Once Del Potro became the player he became, it was 8-6. And really, I felt like Del Potro really started picking up around 2009 Miami. Not really at the very start of the year, but around 2009 Miami. And he beat Nadal in an epic match there, 7-6 in the third set, a really underrated match, 2009 Miami, where Del Potro was just hitting massive, kind of an offense versus defense kind of battle. And in that match, starting from that match, 7-6 for Nadal, just 7-6 in their last 13 matches, starting from 2009 Miami. So Del Potro was really close with Nadal and had great records again, and so many great matches that he didn't end up winning but got so close, like that Wimbledon 2013 match versus Djokovic. There's many, many to name. And that's another thing. Del Potro, in these kind of big tournaments, when he was able to play, even despite his injuries, he was always losing to big three players, if not Murray. So in his first major quarterfinal, I'll give you the stats real quick on that. He was always in his kind of slam results. In the slams, he just couldn't escape these players, these all-time greats, these big three. So in his first major quarterfinal, US Open 2008, he lost to Andy Murray in 4 sets. The year before he would go on to win it, he lost to Murray. Murray would go on to reach the final. And then, in 2009, he lost to Federer in the semis and quarterfinals of the Australian Open and French Open. The French Open, he led Federer, I believe, 2-1. If not 2-love, I believe it was 2-1. At the French Open in 2009. And then, so he had to play against Murray, then he had to play against Federer in those ones. Obviously, he would go on to beat Federer in the 2009 US Open final. And then, like I said, he struggled with an injury period. But then 2012, 2013, once he got back, in 4 of 6 events, he would go on to make the quarterfinals. One of them, he would make the semifinals. Once again, Federer would beat him at the Australian Open and French Open in the quarterfinals. And then to Novak at the US Open in 2012 in the quarterfinals, which I consider one of the highest level straight sets matches I've ever watched. One of the highest level matches I've ever watched. Del Potro Djokovic, really underrated match. There's some good highlights on YouTube of that one. Djokovic is playing unbelievable in that one. To beat Del Potro. And then, like I said, 2013 Wimbledon semifinal where Djokovic would beat Del Potro. Just whenever Del Potro would go deep at these tournaments, he always had to play him. Constantly having to play these different guys. And then, like I said, he had a bit of a period between early 2014 to mid-2016. And then Wawrinka beat him, eventual champion at the 2016 US Open. Wawrinka beat him in 4 sets. Del Potro is still really not at his best at that point, but still a good win for Wawrinka. But then, let's see. He beat Federer in the 2017 US Open quarterfinals, the next kind of big run he would do. But then he lost to Nadal in the next round. He lost to Nadal in the semifinals of the French and then quarterfinals of Wimbledon. Lost to Djokovic in the final of the US Open. He was only playing big 3 guys at the majors. And like I said, he was still very competitive with them, always just bringing such a high tier of play. And just his mentality was unbelievable. And something else I would say about his mentality. Well, first of all, it takes a certain mentality, a Rafael Nadal mentality, if you could say, to constantly be suffering and be going through this injuries, but still have the motivations to want to come back. Even now, he wants to come back. He was hoping to play the U.S. Open last month. It's about 5 years now since he reached his last final from around the time of recording this. And he still wants to come back and play, which is really a kind of, he plays this incredible mentality. I mean, there was an amazing match at the U.S. Open, 2017 U.S. Open against Dominic Thiem, another great player from this kind of big 3 era that really has underperformed, and also struggled with some injuries as well. But against Dominic Thiem, Thiem absolutely dismantled Del Potro. At the start of that U.S. Open, Thiem was the number 6 seed. I think it was 6-2, 6-1 Dominic Thiem. I watched that match live on TV. I was watching as it went down, and it looked like Del Potro was completely out of it. He looked exhausted. He was huffing and puffing. It looked like he wasn't even going to finish the match. It uses the crowd to do the most incredible comeback ever. Wins the next 3 sets straight to have a 2-set slow comeback against Dominic Thiem at the U.S. Open. And that was, what, I think 3 years before Dominic Thiem would go on to win the tournament. A year before Dominic Thiem would play an all-time match against Nadal at the U.S. Open. Thiem loves the U.S. Open, and he was playing phenomenal. Del Potro just raised it to an absolutely incredible level. Always doing comebacks, like I said, always being close with other players. And just an incredible mentality. Like I said, when he is winning, he has that momentum, he does better, which is something he was never able to get throughout his whole career, because whenever he'd start to pick up, his injuries would get him. And I don't know if it's the way he played with his 6'6" build and the way he would hit the forehand. He had a lot of different injuries, and his kind of athletic game, he was a great athlete as well. But whatever it was, he was constantly getting injuries, never able to use the momentum. But he was constantly getting close. His mentality is one of a kind, incredible comeback mentality, but also, like I said, when he's winning, he never lets up a lead. I have the most impressive stat for you, the most underrated stat as well for you about Juan Martin Del Potro. He is here's the big one. He is number 8th best in the Open era of anyone, any player, Connors, McEnroe, Borg, anyone, Sampras, Agassi, anybody at all. He's the 8th best in the Open era after winning the first set. The 8th best of anybody in the Open era after taking the first set. He only lost 31 matches of his 600-some matches throughout his whole career after he took the first set. When he'd have that lead, he would hang on to it. And you might say, well, that's not that impressive. He already won the first set. You'd expect him to win. What separates amazing players from the best of the best is that once you have a lead, you don't let it up. And anybody who's played tennis knows that's not easy. Once you have the lead, you just don't let it up. Against the highest level athletes, highest level players in the world in tennis, whenever he'd grab that lead, he would run with it to the finish line. That takes the mentality of somebody. He's not chasing anything. He's just chasing the victory. He's not chasing the other player. The other player is in the head. He has that belief in himself, that push in himself, that drive, that he can just carry it on to the finish line. Yeah, that's the mark of an all-time, or of a really, really great player. And that's the mark of all-time greats, is that they will absolutely take it to the finish line. Now, and it's a mark of all-time greats, that's what I say, but it's only behind Murray, Nadal, Djokovic, Federer, McEnroe, Connors, and Bjorn Borg. Those are the only players ahead of Juan Martin Del Potro in this stat. Only players. You can name anyone. Those are the only players. McEnroe, Connors, Borg, and the Big Four. Del Potro's number 8 in that stat. And if you don't count matches against the Big Three, by the way, like I said, he was constantly winning sets against the Big Three, constantly being super close against the Big Three. And so if you don't count matches that where Del Potro took the first set against the Big Three, that he only lost 19 matches throughout his whole career where he won the first set. He had 12 different matches where he took the first set against the Big Three and lost. Not counting those, 19 players against the rest of the tour where only 19 matches where he took the first set and he lost the match. That's incredible to have that kind of mentality that's just so dominant and just utterly winning relentlessly winning unapologetically, getting to the finish line, being able to push yourself that way against the best athletes in the world. That's not easy to do. And Del Potro was able to do that. 92.29% of matches where he won the first set, he ended up winning the match. Very, very good stuff. I mean, Del Potro has so many incredible stats about him that it's really unbelievable. I mean, this is a guy that in 2007, he said, somebody asked him, what are your dreams in tennis? And the Argentine said, Del Potro said, I want to win a Grand Slam, done, and I want to win the Davis Cup. He actually denied to play the Davis Cup a lot of times throughout his career, but he did win the Davis Cup in 2016. He actually had an epic semifinal versus Great Britain. In the semifinals, he played Great Britain. Great Britain won the year prior. Murray helped them win the year prior. He had an absolute epic against Andy Murray. 5-set match. I think it's the most underrated match of the last 20 years. I genuinely believe that. I watched that live and I can't even describe how good of a match that was. Murray versus Del Potro, at least the most underrated match that features a Big Four member of the last 20 years. That match was phenomenal. Del Potro played so many epics. Like I said, he won Davis Cup. He won, he got 2 medals. He got the bronze medal at the Olympics in 2012. Beat Djokovic in the bronze medal match there, after losing to Federer on the grass. In 2016, beat Nadal in an epic 6-4 in the third set, and then lost to Murray in the final. I mean, Del Potro is playing against these all-time great players, and it's amazing. Even 2016, being able to beat Nadal, and Nadal, 2015, 2016, not his best, but Nadal was playing phenomenal. Some incredible passing shots and shot making in that match. But Del Potro was unbelievably good in his kind of comeback tournament. Beat Djokovic and Nadal in that tournament. And speaking of beating 2 players like that back-to-back, let's talk about the major that Del Potro won. Listen, I'm talking about Del Potro like a player who should have obviously won more majors than he did. I think nearly anyone would agree that he at least deserved more than 1 major. I personally think he could have won 5 majors. He could have won more. If he played in a different era specifically, but even in this era, he should have won more than he had. But talking about that match, it's the closest comparison we have to the Wimbledon final that happened this year between Alcaraz and Djokovic. Federer won the last 5 U.S. Opens in a row, beating players like Andy Murray in 2008, Leighton Hewitt with 2 bagels in 2004. Some incredible wins from Federer and Del Potro. Federer beating Djokovic in the semifinals 2009. Del Potro lost to Federer at both the first 2 majors of the year, beats Federer in a 5-set match, in a final. 20 years old, in a final, hitting some incredible shots, huge hitting shots. Federer was so close to going up, even I believe 2 sets to love up. I think he was 2 points away from going up 2 sets to love, if not 2 sets to 1. He was 2 sets to 1 up. He was 2 points away from going up 2 sets to love. that match was an absolute epic. Federer played incredible as well, but Del Potro was unbelievable. And then, like I said, he just got injured. After ATP Finals 2009, kind of to start 2010, he got injured, and that hindered his momentum. He didn't have that momentum to ride on. Then he started getting it back a little bit, 2012, 2013, gets injured for 2.5 years. Comes back, Olympics, then gets injured for another year, 2018, kind of his final full season, where he's at his best, and yeah, after that, it all kind of started going downhill for him. But still, that major, he dismantled Nadal in the semifinals. I keep saying, Del Potro played a really good ball against Nadal. Obviously, it's kind of offense to defense. I don't know how much you can say that put into it, but the big shots maybe neutralizing and equalizing Nadal's defense and actually being able to hit through him. But listen, the guy was as talented as they come. I mean, Nadal is a talent of talents, but Del Potro as well. Like I said, very complete player. His running forehand is insane. We saw that all throughout that 2009 U.S. Open. His forehand on the run, I mean, he makes it look so easy. Just hitting... I mean, his forehands look faster than any forehand I've ever seen. I don't know if they are. I don't think consistently they were, but the sound that his racket made, like a Thor hammer, every time, just the cleanest flat stroke across the ball, made it look so easy, so elegant, and just a good touch, good net play, good hands. His between the leg shot was awesome. He would hit tweeners. I remember a lob he hit over Davidinko, I'd like to say, at Indian Wells one year. That was phenomenal, but he constantly was hitting between the leg shots. He had a few rallies against Federer, the original kind of player who popularized the tweener to an insane level. He had a few points rallies where he hit a tweener and Federer hit one too. And it was like a tweener rally. Del Potro is a talent, and he was just unbelievable to watch at his best. One of the highest peaks of the last 20 years. And it's such a shame we didn't get to see him at full flourish, but I'm glad we saw him. If you watch that US Open 2009 semifinal, beating Nadal and then beating Federer back-to-back, the problem is he had to do that time and time again, and when you have to beat one all-time great and then beat the next, beat another in the next round, and that's just so hard to do time and time again. He didn't win a Masters. Del Potro didn't win a Masters up until 2018 Indian Wells. He didn't win a Masters until 2018 Indian Wells. He got to a few finals, semifinals of Indian Wells, beats Djokovic in the semifinals, but then loses to Nadal in the final, 6-4 in the third set. It's like he kept having these like close chances to get one, but he never did. 2018 saves 2 match points against Federer in the final and wins his first Masters. 2018. This is after 8 surgeries or 6 surgeries, after a lot of wrist surgeries. And finally, he gets his first Masters. He gets his career high ranking of number 3 that year. He was actually never ranked higher than 4 in the world up until that year. Very strange career. The definition of underperforming, if I do say so. The absolute definition of underperforming. And it was just infectious. He loved playing. He was a very lighthearted personality. I remember him hugging the line judge. Just super gentle giant, they call it. But yeah, I mean, the thumbnail and the title, I mean, some people say it's clickbait. I don't know, because I don't know what I believe. Because maybe Del Potro could have been an all-timer if he played in a different era and if he wasn't riddled by injuries. If you rode the momentum throughout his whole career, playing at the level he was able to bring, constantly competitive, constantly a threat for big titles against big players, I mean, it's hard to go against him with the complete game that he showed, and the stats that he put up, like I said, win percentage incredible, 71.6%, 73% at majors, and that's including a lot of majors where he was either debilitated by injury or just coming back constantly. It was just, he was constantly barraged by this kind of injury. But listen, he did what he set out to do. He said recently he's disappointed he was never world number 1. I think he is one of the best players that never reached this title of world number 1. But he did manage to win a major. He did manage to win Davis Cup for Argentina. That was the first and only win for Argentina, a country that's been great. I feel like has been robbed of 2 world number 1s in Guillermo Vilas and Juan Martin Del Potro. That's not the only thing they've been robbed of. Argentina has had some fantastic players over the years that probably have underachieved. David Nalbandian. So there's a lot to say about Juan Martin Del Potro, obviously. I mean, I can just keep going on and on, but I'm glad he has that US Open 2009. And I mean, the stats like I said, 8th in the Open era. 8th in the Open era after winning the first set, and his win percentage is a nearly top 20 of anybody in the Open era, anybody at all, and it's just obvious. I mean, who knows what he would have done. I compared him to Wawrinka, to Ferrer. I think if he had a full career, I think he'd be clearly better than those guys. I don't know if I'd say he'd be up there with Murray, but I wouldn't be opposed to the idea necessarily. It's just very hard to say without having seen Del Potro play a full career. He was unbelievable. He was constantly competitive. Murray did beat the big three guys more than Del Potro. Murray won 46 titles out of, I think, like 70 finals. I mean, Murray, an incredible win percentage, I think like 75% win percentage. Murray is a different beast altogether, 11 major finals. So I don't know necessarily, but I do think that it's not crazy to say that Del Potro had this kind of potential that was at least close to all-time level, and I would say maybe it's on there, because he really brought something special, and his mentality, I think, his competitive mentality was kind of the biggest thing that Juan Martin was able to show throughout his career. But yeah, just an incredible athlete, and he deserved more than one Masters title. He deserved more than one major. There's no doubt about it. No doubt about it. I mean, quickly I can go over some of the injuries that he did face throughout his career, did Juan Martin. Some of the injuries that were constantly debilitating towards him. It's kind of sad to talk about, but there's some to talk about his injuries. He had 8 surgeries throughout his career, 1 on his right wrist in 2010, then 3 on his left wrist in 2014, 2015. There are some smaller injuries as well, but these are some surgeries that he had. Then 4 surgeries on his right knee, which really kind of ended his career. Overall, he fractured his right patella, which is a part of the knee, in 2018, then injured it again in Queens 2019, and then that was kind of what got him in the end. It wasn't the wrists, it wasn't anything like that. It was his knees, so his right knee, and yeah, it got him in the end. But constant injury. But I mean, Juan Martin Del Potro will go down, I think, as a player who did underperform, as a player who did underachieve, as a player who, on an eye test, is clearly a very flashy, strong, amazing player, complete player, and looks just incredible watching him, like he's one of the greats. When you watch him at his best, and he's at full flourish, he looks phenomenal. And obviously there are some downsides to say as well, but I think mostly we can talk about the positive. And I did want to tribute him, and yeah, the stats are unbelievable for what he was able to do. And it's always sad. It's sad. Bjorn Borg didn't get injured, but his career was cut early. Milos Raonic is a player who was constantly barraged by injuries, but I think is underrated. There's these different players. Monica Seles is the ultimate tragedy in tennis. Martin Connolly as well. But Seles, I mean, with ill will against her, is crazy. That's the ultimate tragedy. But Del Potro, I think, as well, is one of the biggest what-ifs in tennis. And I hopefully put it across with how competitive he was constantly against the big three, how dominant he was when he was able to get a lead, which is a show of a really great player. It's one thing to chase a comeback. It's another thing to just dominate and just keep on dominating and winning when you have it. And then also his win percentage, and so many things to say. So anyway, that's kind of my tribute to the Argentine, one of my favorite players. Very nice personality, great talent of the sport, huge forehand. That will be remembered forever. The shockwaves of that forehand will be seen in the sport for a long time. And yeah, that's all I got to say. He did end up getting 22 titles. He did get a major. He did get a Masters. And I'm happy that he at least got that. And the major that he did win was absolutely phenomenal, beating Nadal and Federer back-to-back. And the legacy of Del Potro lives on, and I think that he should have done more. But with the career he had, it was already amazing what he achieved. And I hope that the memory of Juan Martin lives on, you shall say. I've been Anthony Hirsch with Tennis Commentary Booth. Don't forget to subscribe if you enjoyed it. Don't forget to like the video as well. If you enjoyed it, I'll be back with more stuff. I'll be back with the From Lawns to Arenas podcast soon, and other stuff like that. Yeah, I'll see you guys at the next one.